planning and estimating for your project. My name is Guilherme and I'm a project management expert. I help professionals to become successful project managers. How do I do that? Well, I do that in several different ways. I do that from providing training for for people and companies. I do that for providing mentoring with feedback to help them to develop their skills, not only hard skills but also soft skills. Providing consulting for a company, helping project managers to structure their project and to be sure that they are more successful during their execution there. Before I forget, this content here is part of the warm up of the Project Management Summit. This is episode number 9. The warm up for the Project Management Summit. It's a free event I'm going to make to teach you how to develop your project management skills, how to progress with your development there to make sure that you can be more successful as a project manager. So if you are interested in that, click in the link here, or if you're watching this on Instagram, go in the bio, click in the link there, and subscribe for free. The content for the Project Management Summit will be available only for 1 week. I'm going to provide you a lot of content. I'm going to provide you extra materials to study so you can download everything. I'm going to provide you exercise. I'm doing everything that I can to make sure that I can help you to develop your project management skills. But I need you that you do your part there. That's of course being present, make sure that you have time, study, ask questions, and then we can progress there together. The topic I'm going to talk about today is planning and estimation for your projects. And why did I select this topic? Well, planning is of course in some situations always can be challenging, but planning is one of the most key things that you're going to have to doing any type of project. And planning is required in any type of project that you're executing. If you're using waterfall, if you're using agile, Scrum, Kanban, or anything that you're doing, there's planning is always required there. What changes, of course, the planning effort, but we go that in more deep today. And what is other thing that's very important estimations. And why I'm talking about estimations this week, I was discussing with a company there, talking about their challenges, how I could best support. And one of the things that pop up, that it's a big company there, that they mentioned one of their biggest challenges is estimations. Why? Because they work estimations both what if they are using waterfall or agile. And estimations, of course, they are always challenging in projects. So also why, and then I think it makes sense if I combine talking about planning with estimations. So make sure this is both are key for any project success there. And of course, I'm going to start this with a quote from Mike Tyson. I hope that you know Mike Tyson. He's probably one of the best boxers of all time. And he has a very nice quote he says that everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And why I'm starting that? I'm already starting talking about planning? Because I'm going to talk about a lot of different stuff that you can do for planning. I'm going to talk about tools, estimations, how teams work, planning effort, waterfall, agile. But what you need to keep in mind is whatever is your plan, life will happen, so you're going to need to adapt. No plan is perfect. So everything, what I can guarantee to you, you are going to need to adapt. Of course, I'm not sure how much you are going to need to adapt for the project, how much you are going to be required to adapt, if it's changing the entire plan or just making some fine adjustment. But what I can tell you, yes, you're going to need to adapt. So let's talk about first, of course, project planning. One of the things that I've already kind of hinted this in the beginning, but it's very important that you understand that project planning is one of the project performance domains. If you don't know what's a project performance domain, the project performance domain is stated in the project management body of knowledge standard, uh, so-called PMBOK. PMBOK is the most famous and most known project management standard around the world. That's the standard from the Project Management Institute, PMI. And in the 7th edition, they make quite an interesting approach there. They change it from a process-based standard to a principle-based standard. And of course, they define the project management principles plus the project management performance domains. And of course, as you could expected, Planning is always a project performance domain. And if you are wondering, but is PMI, PMBOK is only used on waterfall? No, the principles that they are in the project management, the PMBOK 7 edition, and the project management performance domains, they are used in any type of project, meaning any type of project that you're going to see, you're going to have a planning phase. Of course, what's important that you understand here, a planning phase in in a waterfall project will be different from a planning phase, for example, if you're following Scrum. Why? What does? Let me see. I have. Let me go back. I have an interesting slide here to help you to understand. What's the main difference there? If you're following a waterfall approach, you it's understood that what you're going to do. You're going to collect and understand requirements, then you're going to work on defining the scope that you need to execute there, and then you're going to plan your project. What do I mean planning by project? When you are working a project planning phase, you you start with requirements and you start drafting your scope. Then you are going to start to plan there your timeline together with your resource. So you're going to have an idea about your time and resources there. And then what you're going to do next there, you're going to have your cost initial estimation. You're going to make a quality assumptions there, or understand the quality that's required for your project. What do I mean quality that's required for your project? Every project requires quality, of course, but you can have different quality levels. Very simple example of that. You're buying a car. What's the quality level of your car? You're buying a Fiat 500, or you're buying a, I don't know, Toyota Aygo, or you're going to buy a BMW Series 7, or are you going to buy a Porsche? All those things, there are cars. But of course, the quality and the expectation for those cars are quite different. Why it's important to understand this in a planning process? Because you can imagine a Fiat 500 has a price, a Porsche Cayenne has a different price, a BMW Series 7 they have a different price. So that affects your cost. Of course, that might as well affect your time. If you have to do a qualification for the type of product, it can take much longer. For example, I've worked in the automotive industry with product development, and as part of the qualification, there was something as called as a corrosion test. What's a corrosion test? You are going to put a component or a system or a part in a car, and this car will just run around the world with a lot of variation temperature. It's going to rain, and sometimes you are going to go to the beach, and then so you are going to have more salt exposure because salt is in the air, and when you are very close to the beach. And of course, you don't want the corrosion in the car starts to look bad. So you need to have a corrosion to make sure that this has a right quality. And why I'm talking about that? Because for this project, only the corrosion text, only the corrosion test took 4 months there. What does it mean? Well, that's a quality requirement, then of course affects also my time. So, and of course, depending on what you learn in the quality, you also need to update your scope and you need to update the requirements. So quality is of course very important. Then you move to plan or to understand your communication. And planning your communication can be different in various different stages. If you are working with a team, and if you are working with depending on the environment that you are working, if you are working like a manufacturing environment in a more mature company, usually you have the communication and the governance already defined. So you kind of the communication and the governance of the project channels are already predefined. So of course, as a communication, you're going to have weekly meetings with your team. You're going to, maybe you have monthly reviews with the top stakeholders, the sponsor, so on. But that's a way to do it. And then, of course, later on, you need to make an initial risk assessment. Why you're going to make the initial risk assessment only close to the end? Because you need to cover all the other areas to understand the risk assessment. Of course, if you compare with the PMBOK 6th edition here, you might say, yeah, but you did not add procurement. Yeah, but the procurement should be inside of the scope here, and the kind of you what you are going to what you have in your scope, you need to buy it something, or the company will make it internally. And the stakeholders, of course, they're directly connected with the communication that I put in the project. So I try to simplify the charter. What's very important here if you're working in this waterfall project, you're going to follow those steps and you need to go back for iterations. Meaning that I just give you an example. I predefine a first draft scope. I go for a time. I draft out a cost. But then I find out something in quality. Then I want a Porsche. Well, if you want a Porsche, I need to update my costs and I need to update my scope and I need to update my requirements because those are things that I'm learning according to the project. So we need to be updated. So you need to run this few times before you have something that's mature enough that you're going to call it project baseline. And if I go back to the other slide, uh, and once you have this project baseline, once you have this plan clear here, you are going to move to execution, or at least most of it. You don't. Sometimes you don't need to have the full detailed plan. Some for should have a project of 2 years. You are not going to have the last month of the project in all the nitty gritty details there. But you need to have something high level to be considered inside the plan. And then you move to execution to release it. Something very important to mention here, because if you're talking about waterfall project, a lot of people think, oh, if you're working with a waterfall project, you're just going to create the plan, you're going to create everything as a project manager, and then you're going to go there and tell your team that's what you need to do it, that's what you must do it. And in reality, that's not how it should work. For the simple reason is if you do everything yourself as the project manager, there's a big chance that you're going to miss a lot of stuff, that you're going to make a lot of wrong assumptions, and then you're going to end up in trouble. Other point, if you do everything yourself and you do not talk with your team, and you do not involve your team in the process, it will be your plan, not the team plan. So you need to involve your team to make sure that you have better assumptions, that the team also gets an understanding of the goal and how to move forward there. And also in the end, if you build this timeline together with your team, will be a team plan here. Because very important here, if people don't understand the basic plan, how they can execute it. So if you create a nice plan, you put in your computer and you try to run it, how people are going to execute it? It's kind of, and when I'm talking about a plan, I also make sure that you have a clear goal. Think about if you take a taxi. The old days, now you have Uber, you order everything, but in the old days, if you take a taxi in the street, and if you say, I want to go to my house, and the taxi driver asks you, okay, where is your house? Then you say, no, no, I'm not going to provide an address. Just go, just go. I'm telling you, go, go, go. You're going to learn while we go. Well, that will be a difficult journey for the taxi driver. Or either you're going to end up in trouble, he does not go anywhere, or you get lost, or you take longer, or you're going to end up in a traffic jam. Any other point, you're not using the taxi driver knowledge of the roads, of the different paths, of the traffic jams. So that's something very important. You need to discuss your plan with your team. Because if you don't do that, you are in trouble. And you are going to have to trouble that. So very important. Even if you are using waterfall, this is going to be an interactive process there, and that needs to happen with your team. But what if you are running an agile project, for example? Let's say that you are using Scrum. Well, if you are using Scrum, when you start a Scrum, what's the first event on the Scrum? Scrum, if you don't know, it's one of the most used agile framework there. Why? Because agile is a kind of umbrella term, and you have different frameworks inside of that. Scrum, Kanban, Lean software, extreme programming. Scrum is the most known one. If you're using Scrum, you're going to have there. You have the sprint planning. What's the idea of the sprint planning? You have the product backlog. That's basically all everything that needs to be done in a project there. All the requirements, all the scope, all the deliverables needs to be in the project backlog. And the product owner is going to make a prioritization there. And then you get together to decide, okay, based on this priority list, what we can do in one sprint. That's how you work. And then you are going to decide, okay, we need to break down these in further tasks, and you adjust, but then you have a plan for the sprint. And even though you are planning only the sprint, if you have a good product owner there, you should have an idea on what you're planning to release, and you should have a release date, how many sprints you are going to have for a release, and you, even though if it's an initial attempt, you are going to have an idea what needs to be done there. You are going to have an idea on what you can accomplish to a release. Because let's assume you have 10 sprints for a release. Well, you need to have an idea based on, okay, what do we expect that they're going to, what's the minimum requirement that they're going to complete this, so you can release a first version of a product, for example. Of course, this is not fixed. That's why that every sprint you're going to execute, then you are going to inspect, and in the end of a sprint you are going to adapt, meaning that you can adapt your scope, you adapt your requirements, and you can adapt what you planning to release there. And that goes every sprint. That's why it's an interactive approach, and that's why kind of you're incrementally building something there. So those are the two basic, uh, the most one of the most fundamental difference among waterfall and among agile is the planning effort that you put up front. Of course, if you are planning a house, it can be much easier to define a house. You say, I know what's the area of the house that I want. I know how many bedrooms, how many bathrooms, size of the kitchen. I know what color I want the house. I know if I want a pool or not. So it's much easier to define requirements. Let's say that you are creating something, you had an idea about a software. I have an idea, and let me make a very stupid example here. I know that's already an app for that. Say, I had a nice idea to create a software so people can order pizza there. They're going to be able to see what type of pizza that you have. They're going to be able to change the toppings that you have there. And then they see the price. They're going to be able to see pictures from those pictures there, how they are going to look like, and so on. Well, those are some of the requirements. But you maybe for this app you say, yeah, but there's some stuff that you're not going to have fully clarity, how you're going to make this work, how you're going to make connection like with payment facility, where you're going to start, what kind of infrastructure that you need to scale the software. Those are kind of things that you might need to learn there. So you're going to learn during the execution. So you don't need to have all those requirements clear up front, because that might be hard, because you don't even want. I'm giving the example like because a pizza app, that's something that you already have it, so might sound very straightforward, but might not be like that. So keep that in mind. Those are the most fundamental difference. So I talk about in general about the planning, how you're going to create those plannings for the project, but what about the estimations there? Well, if you look for basic items for estimation, like me find here the slide, there's different tools that can be used to estimate a project there. And where is it? Yeah. For example, and those tools for estimation can be used both for cost and time. And then, of course, those are the tools mentioned in the PMBOK. And if you want to wanna work in like with Scrum, there's different ways where you can facilitate estimation, but I'm going to talk about that. Well, if you follow only what's in the PMBOK, the tools that you have there, they're expert judgment. That in the end, that's what you end up using on Scrum. You have analog estimation, meaning that you are going to look for something that's similar to the project that you are going to execute, and you are going to estimate based on that. You have a parametric estimation, more based on data. You can have a 3-point estimation that you're going to say, I'm going to have worst case, best case, and most likely case, and you're going to average up these. And you have a bottom-up estimation where you're going to estimate everything for the details. For example, I'm going to estimate a house. How many cubic meters of concrete that I have in this house? How many cubic meters I can concrete in one day for this house, and so on. Then you can make an estimation. What's important about that one when you talk about estimations, and why estimation usually so challenging for companies? First, because you're going to see that most companies they do not have any database. They do not have this organized in a decent way. The knowledge usually is there, or hopefully in most of the cases it's there, because I've seen companies that even the knowledge is not there because they are trying to do something they've never done before. But if you are working in a company that has some type of knowledge, this is already going to be there. But so if the knowledge is there, but there's no database, what can you do to bridge the gap? Well, you can start to organize the data because then you're going to have much more, much better estimations, and they start to be much more because if you are doing based on data, is the data driven, so the confidence level of your estimation is better. What's the challenge with estimations? Like, for example, if you are using Agile or Scrum, you are trusting on the expert judgment, and there's different ways that you are going to take the data. Something very important there, the sprint planning, the developers, and I'm talking about developers not only because if it's only software, but developers, it's the language that's used for the people actually doing the work in the Scrum guide. They called everyone developers. They are going to be able, they are the ones responsible to provide you an estimation. Then you can imagine that you're going to put a task there, and then they are going to say, okay, that's how much that I think that will take for this task. Sometimes they can make an estimation in hour. They can use story points. That's basically a story point needs to be associated with a metric of time in the end. But what you are getting, people think, that's, I think this task here takes me 2 days. What happens is, depending on the type of task, they're not sure. And the estimation itself is something, but there's also can be very much, and it is very much affected by also the workload of a person. For any, then the workload of a person. Why? Because if I tell you how long do you need, for example, to write a report. Let's say we are talking about a report that takes you 2 hours. I say, to write the report takes me 2 hours. The next question is, when do you have time to work in this report? Because it might be that you are fully busy, you're 100% of your capacity being used there, and you say, I'm going to have the time to work on that only in 2 weeks. So although your estimation for something is 2 hours, the lead time to get it done will be at least 2 weeks. So there's always a variation in what's called an estimation and also the lead time, because the lead time for something, and let me see if I find something nice to show you here. The lead time is also a combination between the touch time, that's the time that you're executing something, and the waiting time. So the estimation can be even based on data, and the estimation can be correct, but the workload of every team member also will affect that. And then again, that's why in the sprint, the developers they need to say something, but that's also why I talk about waterfall. Why you need to involve your team, because if you take, oh, this task takes 1 week, might be true, but also you might not be aware of the workload of this person there. When this person will be available to do something like that. And that's why even in my programs, in my trainings there, I talk about a lot, and even when you're talking about waterfall, I talk about these concepts of lead time and bottleneck, because in the end, that's what you don't expect it. And of course, if you have a project that people are 100% allocated for your project, might be a bit easier to have a better visibility and also for prioritization. But some people, if some resources they are shared among several projects there, so if you estimate something you don't talk with them, you are heading for trouble. Let's assume here that I give the example for quality. You have a quality engineer there, and you need him to do some tasks there to define a quality plan or to make sure that you can define your quality requirements. That because in the end, the quality requirements also affect scope, affect time, cost, and so on. As I already mentioned, the example of a Fiat 500 or a Porsche. We say, okay, I need this guy issue to create this quality requirement. 1 week it's enough. But what if the same person is working 10 other projects and all the other projects have higher priority? Say it's not going to be done in 1 week. He's going to have time to look on that in only 3 months for the future. So what are you going to do? So that's why it's important to talk with people, to involve your team, because then you're going to learn this kind of stuff. And of course, you should have the data for how long it takes to execute something. If you have the data for something at touch time, and you need to have a feeling from the team members what might be the waiting time there. And of course, depending how you're working there, for example, if you're using the Kanban method, there's a nice way, and of course, that you have an idea about the full lead time, including already the waiting time, because it's much you get better visibility and transparency there, and you collect the data, so you have a higher confidence level when you are making those estimations. But if you don't do that, and and I have to say that most of companies they don't do that. You need to know it. You need to learn that, and that's the kind of feeling that you have from your team. That you kind of steer and align them, and you also, of course, you define on prioritization together. If something is very critical, you are going to discuss with your team. But it's very important that this planning estimation they need to go together with your team. And of course, when I talk about planning estimation, when I talk about time, I talk about resource. And I know some people say you should not call your team member resource. We are people. That's fine. I agree with that. But just for but a lot of people, you see a lot of people the time on resource. But what's important here, you get together with your team to understand what's going on. Because whatever your team says is going to affect your time, is going to affect your cost, might affect your requirements. So planning, it's a team effort. It's always a team effort, regardless the project that you do that. But why I'm talking about, I talk about planning in general, and planning and those estimations, because in the end, when you are talking about planning, you are going to talk about estimations, but also managing working load, managing priorities, managing your team. This is one of the reasons why project management is one of the essential skills to be a successful manager. So that's why it's one of the essential skills also to be a successful entrepreneur. Because those things there, if you have good planning and good estimation skills, that means that you're going to be able to provide better visibility in what needs to be done. It means that you have an idea, you have a clear goal, you have clear steps to take it, and more important, you make sure that these clear goals and clear steps are aligned with the team. They are discussed with the team, and they are also based on the reality. They are discussed based on challenges. They are discussed based on bottlenecks, on prioritization that needs to be done. That's how a good planning process goes. If you try to do a planning process by yourself, you are going to go for trouble. If you try to push a planning into people, you are going to go for trouble. What if you define your planning yourself, the planning is perfect, and you tell people you must do that today? Well, my people might go back and tell you, I don't have time to do that today. And there's a big chance that something like that happen because I'm not sure you, but I don't like when people come to me and tell you must do that today because I command. That usually does not sounds right and does not suit well with most of people. So instead of building this team spirit there, you're just pushing yourself into trouble. So you're going to create conflict with your team, and that will head to different types of trouble there. So it's very important to that in your planning you want to get your team involved there. And if you want better quality of estimations, you need of course to involve your team and also to make sure that every time you're involving your team, considering that there's always, remember, there's always what's called the touch time. That's how long something needs to get it done. I give the example of the report, and there's always what's called the waiting time, because that will depend on the workload. Depending, not sure in which kind of company that you are working on, but usually you don't have people sitting around waiting to get work done there. Usually those people, they have different types of workload there, they have different types of demand. So it's up to you as a project manager, as leading a process there, to have this basic understanding. I need to collaborate with my team because I know that they have different things going on there, which we need to figure out together. We need to work together to deliver something to achieve our goal together. So project management is a team sport. If you do not do that as a team, you are going to find yourself in trouble very soon there. Again, if you have questions, feel free to reach out. If you are already following the warm up of the Project Management Summit, one of the things, I have one episode just talking about project management, about principles to be successful while during the project management summit, but while you are going for any type of training. And one of them is asking questions, so you can ask questions in the comments in the video. You can ask questions on my Instagram Q&A box that's open every day there, or you can send me a direct message on Instagram, or you can even reply on one of the emails, because if you subscribe for the project management summit, at some point you are going to get emails from me. Just reply one of those emails, and I can answer your question. But it's very important that you take the initiative there, because I can do the best effort to try to teach you something. But if you're not open to that, if you're not telling me what are your challenges there, there's not much that I can do to support. Thank you, and I hope I'm going to see you soon. Bye.